no idle threat. $200 million within 72 hours, or 2 Japanese citizens die at the hands of ISIS. State of the Union. A hostile Congress to hear the president's tax the rich proposal.
Much excitement here at America's largest church over the possibility the Holy Father will be coming here. I'm Jason Calvi. I'll have that story coming up next.
And food for thought. A taste of the special delights prepared for the Pope's visit to the Philippines. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, January 20th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. ISIS is threatening to kill 2 Japanese citizens unless Tokyo hands over a $200 million ransom within 72 hours. In a video posted online today, a masked man dressed in black holds a knife over 2 kneeling men in orange jumpsuits. The threat is linked to Japan's support for the U.S.-led coalition that's fighting ISIS in Iraq and Syria. The Japanese Prime Minister, who is visiting Jerusalem, says the international community must deal with terrorists without giving in to them. He stopped short, however, of explicitly ruling out paying a ransom or negotiating with ISIS. Shiite Houthi rebels are shelling the Yemen presidential palace in what's being called a coup. The president was in his home for half an hour during the heavy shelling, but he is unharmed. The rebels have raided the president's offices, looting arms depots on the grounds. This is a dramatic escalation of violence that gripped Yemen's capital since yesterday. At an emergency meeting, the UN Security Council calls for an immediate halt to the fighting in Yemen. There's been no decision yet to evacuate the U.S. embassy there. 2 Navy warships are nearby just in case. The International Criminal Court is warning any party responsible for war crimes in Nigeria will face prosecution. The ICC is looking into allegations Boko Haram extremists are killing large numbers of civilians and using children in the conflict. The international organization also reminds the Nigerian government to prosecute crimes that, quote, deeply shock the conscience of humanity. Boko Haram has increased attacks in recent weeks. 2,000 civilians were reportedly killed by the terrorists earlier this month. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio was in Paris today showing support for France in the wake of recent terror attacks there. He laid a wreath at the kosher deli where 4 hostages were killed. He laid another wreath at the Charlie Hedbo office, the satirical publication where 12 people died. De Blasio returns to New York tonight. Rome's mayor is calling for 500 extra police officers and dozens of soldiers to protect against possible terror attacks. Government offices, embassies, even the Vatican are deemed to be sensitive. The mayor says there needs to be enhanced security following recent terror attacks and plots in Europe. The mayor says current information rules out an imminent terror attack in the Eternal City. Pim Valkenberg directs the Institute for Interreligious Dialogue Study at Catholic University of America. He's an expert in Christian-Muslim relations. How is the high terror alert in Europe affecting Christian-Muslim relations there right now?
Well, as you can imagine, Brian, of course it does not help. Everywhere we see more and more events happening that threaten the good relationships that have formed over the course of the last 50 years since Nostra Aetate between Christians and Muslims. And of course, being involved in dialogue with Muslims, we try to work and to establish positive relationships. But yeah, there are powerful other forces at work here.
So you teach interreligious dialogue at CUA. How is this going to affect your class? What are your students asking about? What are you learning? What are they learning?
Yeah, they have all kinds of questions, and I try to incorporate as much as possible some of the actual events. So last semester it was the origins of ISIS, the Islamic State terror group that we just saw on television as well. Now we have Paris and the Charlie Hebdo attacks and also the kosher supermarket. So I try to teach them about, can you imagine why people would do that, even though it is in no way official Islamic teaching? Why are people attracted to that? But also, why do Muslims react in such a forceful way when Prophet Muhammad is insulted by some of these caricatures?
So a lot of people are lining up to buy the satirical magazine. Many others are deeply offended by that.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Why that difference?
Yeah. Well, I would think in the West, of course, you have kind of a natural tendency. If someone is attacked, you line up with him, even though you don't agree with everything that he does. But there's kind of a feeling of freedom that needs to be protected. Muslims, on the other hand, have this tradition that you are not allowed to picture human beings, let alone prophets. And of course, Prophet Muhammad is not alone a prophet and an eminent human being, but he's a model for Muslims. So if you insult him, you are insulting all Muslims, and that's why they react.
Are you insulted by these cartoons? Do you find anything positive at all?
No, I'm not personally insulted, even though I can imagine that people who hear that again Prophet Muhammad is on the cover of a magazine say, okay, they should know what they are doing, like Pope Francis did. He said, well, if you insult my mother, you know what's coming to you. But I think strangely enough, there's a very positive message to be had from that cartoon as well, because Prophet Muhammad is not only pictured with Je suis Hebdo, Je suis Charlie, but also tout est pardonné, everything has been forgiven. And I think that's a very strong message, because it's indeed the essence of Islam, that God is a merciful God.
Pim Valkenberg from Catholic University of America, thanks for your insight tonight.
Thank you very much. Okay.
And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The White House issues a veto threat today against a pro-life bill. The pain-capable Unborn Child Protection Act would protect unborn babies beginning at 20 weeks of pregnancy. The Republican-controlled House considers that bill on Thursday, the same day as the March for Life here in D.C. It is the 42nd anniversary of the Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion in the U.S. President Obama speaks to the nation and a joint session of Congress tonight on the State of the Union. This is his sixth State of the Union address, but his first to a Republican-controlled Congress. Suzanne LaFranchi reports.
The President of the United States.
Emboldened by an improving economy and uptick in poll numbers, President Obama will continue to be on offense as he delivers his sixth State of the Union address. It will be his first with both houses of Congress under Republican control. While many Republicans believe November's election means it's their time to set the agenda, the president has other plans.
Interestingly, this election seems to have emboldened President Obama. He seems to be charged up to push, pursue, and advance the policies that he cares about.
With the 2016 presidential elections on the horizon, Obama wants to continue to control the economic conversation. He'll aim debate over income inequality, middle-class economic issues, and call to increase taxes on the wealthy. Obama closed out 2014 with a string of high-profile presidential executive orders, including actions with communist Cuba and immigration. He'll also take credit for a rebounding economy.
America is coming back.
In a bid to generate excitement for that agenda, Obama has spent the past couple of weeks out on the road, previewing some of his new initiatives, from making home ownership more affordable to increasing access to high-speed broadband to publicly funding community colleges.
I want to make it free.
Most of the proposals include steps Obama can put in place on his own without congressional legislation.
The president's determined to try to work with Republicans where he can, to try to find common ground. And where they can't, the president's going to be prepared to use all of the elements of his executive authority to move us forward on his own.
Even many of the seating assignments tonight are political. Those invited to sit in the First Lady's box typically showcase what the administration sees as political successes. Among the attendees, Alan Gross, the American contractor whose release from a Cuban prison last month triggered a new era of U.S.-Cuban relations. Republicans have tapped freshman Senator Joni Ernst, hot off a victory in the key battleground state of Iowa, to deliver their response. Ernst serves as a symbol of the GOP wave that toppled Obama's stronghold on the Senate.
And Suzanne LaFranchi will be there at the Capitol for the State of the Union address. In fact, they just had to go through a security search, so that's why she was not able to be with us live. And the Republican National Committee is highlighting the news that under this president, the national debt has grown by 70%, now at $18 trillion. Republicans say Obama's new proposals will only add to that debt. Bob Lehrman is the former White House speechwriter who now teaches political speech writing at American University. So, Bob, the White House seems to be sort of branding this State of the Union address as middle-class economics. Do you expect the president to be more singular and focused this time than he has in the past years?
Well, that's what they say they will do, but the State of the Union is always a kind of laundry list with a lot of issues that are on his plate. And I can't imagine that it'll only have one issue, but there are general themes.
This has got to be a tough speech to write because it's kind of boring, really, compared to some of the other speeches that presidents give. You, as a speechwriter, what does it take to make a successful State of the Union address? Well,
first of all, you got to know the president's goals. And there are two goals here. It's not just what laws do we pass in 2015, it's who do we elect president in 2016. So he will propose a number of things that he knows won't pass, but that whoever the Democratic candidate is in 2016, they can run against the Republicans on them.
So this is a political speech, not really a presidential speech.
It's both.
It is both.
It is both.
He is the president.
It is the State of the Union, which of course he will say is strong because of the many great things we've done, most of them in his administration. But it is also very political, yeah.
How is the State of the Union really a preview of the budget?
Well, it is a preview because the things he highlights are things that we spend a lot of money on. And one thing that is really important for people to know, I'm not the first to say this, the budget is a moral document. People say, okay, we'll build more drones and we'll supply less food stamps. You know, these are choices that involve values. And so the values that you see in the State of the Union, when he talks about free college tuition for community college, privacy safeguards, tax increases for the middle class, or tax cuts for the middle class, tax increases for the wealthy. These are all choices that involve values and morality.
Can't help but think of some of the State of the Union addresses delivered by Ronald Reagan. He was called the great communicator. How does this president stack up? I mean, you can write a great speech, but it's got to be delivered.
Yeah. I teach speech writing, and the speeches I teach are great speeches that Ronald Reagan delivered. I don't agree with any of them, but they're really
You wrote for Al Gore.
I did write for Al Gore, yes. And in 1989, I wrote the Democrats' The Minority Response to the State of the Union for Lloyd Benson. But I also teach Democrats, and the techniques that people use and the kinds of delivery, both excellent. Ronald Reagan was a great communicator, and so is Barack Obama in a different way.
Bob Lehrman, former White House speechwriter. Thanks so much for your insight.
It's a pleasure.
We appreciate it. Well, the Supreme Court rules in favor of an Arkansas prison inmate in a religious freedom case. The prisoner is a Muslim who wants to grow a beard as an act of his faith. Arkansas prison policy forbids beards officials say could be used to hide contraband. The unanimous ruling today allows the prisoner to grow a half-inch beard. In its opinion, the court said a short beard would not seriously compromise prison safety. Federal prisons and most state prisons already allow half-inch beards. Church history will be made with the first canonization on American soil this fall, and Pope Francis plans to preside himself here in Washington. Jason Calvi tells us about the buzz surrounding the Pope's trip to the U.S. in September.
Basilica of the National Shrine, this is Francis. How may I direct your call?
Every few minutes, calls for Francis.
As of now, we are awaiting information from the Vatican, and we don't have any details yet.
The Pope said yesterday he plans to name a new saint at D.C.'s National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception.
Always exciting to have the Holy Father come over here, to just really experience what it means to have him as a father.
It's awesome that he's coming here.
Excitement overflowing with the news our Rome correspondent brought last night that the Holy Father will be visiting this place, America's largest Catholic church, to lead the canonization ceremony for a man some have never heard of. Have you ever heard of that man?
I haven't, actually.
There's a man that he's going to possibly be canonizing named
Junipero Serra.
Say it better than I can.
So I grew up in California, and in California, every school student learns about Junipero Serra.
The soon-to-be Spanish-born saint is even taught in California's public schools, where Franciscan Father Garrett Edmonds studied.
We call him the apostle to California. He is the one who brought the Christian faith to California. Before that, he had a long career as a missionary in Mexico.
By the fall, another missionary plans to be here in the flesh. Even though the Pope informally confirmed it, those here at the Basilica can't. A key planner of Pope Benedict's 2008 visit to D.C., Susan Gibbs, says that's because the planners of this trip are likely working out all the details, and then much more.
It is 100-hour weeks, meetings constantly about the landing at Andrews, weekly meetings for that, meetings about the Mass, who's going to be at the Mass, how many tickets do you give to parishes, how many do you give to other dioceses, who's going to sit where, Who are the lectors going to be?
For those who want to call the Basilica, the best bet is just to wait a month or two, and then...
You can check our website.
In Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, big-name business leaders head to the World Economic Forum. We talk with an attending member from Switzerland. On Tuesday, the 20th of January, thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. The AirAsia plane that crashed last month was climbing at an abnormally high rate. That's the latest information gathered from the recently recovered black box. Authorities in Indonesia say the jet was climbing at about 6,000 feet per minute. Normal is 1,000 to 2,000 feet per minute. In its final contact, the pilots asked to climb to avoid storm clouds, but permission was denied. Radar data shows the plane plunged and suddenly disappeared. The remains of only 53 of the 162 victims have been recovered so far. Multi-billionaires and world leaders are clinking glasses in the alpine resort of Davos, Switzerland. This is the eve of the World Economic Forum. This year's gathering of financial and political elites will cover diverse issues. They include economic inequality, falling oil prices, and combating terrorism. The forum was founded in 1971 as a catalyst for global economic initiatives.
The World Economic Forum is based on the principle to combine economics with social responsibility.
About 2,500 people are expected in Davos for the annual forum. Gary Haugen is president of International Justice Mission. He's an attending member at the World Economic Forum this week, joining us by Skype from Davos, Switzerland. Now, you're on the Global Agenda Council on Justice. What are some of the major goals of that council, Gary?
Well, the straightforward goal of that council is to make sure that everybody has access to justice in our world. And one of the biggest problems is that the poorest in our world don't have access to justice systems that actually protect them from violence and actually protect their rights. So I'm gathered here with world leaders on this specific council to make sure that the poorest have access to justice.
Diverse membership on that council. You've got people from Kenya, Egypt, Latin America. You are a Christian from the United States. What perspective do you bring?
Well, I especially bring the perspective of our hundreds of workers at International Justice Mission who are serving the poorest around the world to try to protect them from violence, and the way that criminal justice systems don't actually protect them. And so what we're going to be talking about here is to make sure that the law actually protects the poor from violence so that they can realize their dreams of getting out of poverty.
A major job there that you have. Now, the UN Sustainable Development Goals are also being drafted right now. The Pope likely to bring a Catholic perspective when he addresses the General Assembly in New York in the fall. What perspective do you bring? What are you looking for out of those goals?
Well, the Pope has brought an important emphasis on caring for the poor, and the Sustainable Development Goals have been this focused effort to make sure that there is a plan for doing so. When they did this in the year 2000, the United Nations had 8 priority goals, but there was never any mention of the problem of violence against the poor. So we're here to make sure that the least of these are being protected and safe from violence so that they actually can enter into that abundant life for which they were created.
Do you think the business leaders attending will hear your message?
I think there's great openness. You know, they come here with this goal that's stated. The World Economic Forum exists to improve the state of the world. And so the question is, improve the state of the world for whom? And so I think these leaders are actually quite earnest to consider what does it mean for the whole world to be improved for everyone, not just those who are the richest or those who are the most powerful. And so it's just not going to be sustainable to have growth that isn't shared by all.
Gary Haugen, president of International Justice Mission, joining us by Skype from Davos, Switzerland. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Brian.
Up next, a record 4,000 March for Life in Chicago as the big march here in Washington nears. And we return to Manila tonight for a taste of the local culture.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and ahead of Thursday's March for Life, a record number marched through the Windy City this past weekend. An estimated 4,000 people marched through downtown Chicago, calling for the Roe v. Wade decision to be overturned. That 1973 Supreme Court ruling legalized abortion in all 50 states. Chicago's Archbishop Blaise Supich was firm in his support for life. Chicago Bears co-owner Pat McCaskey recited a pro-life adaptation of the classic poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade. Well, the March for Life is encouraging marchers to use the hashtag #WhyWeMarch when posting on social media Thursday. The hashtag can be used on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter with a reason why you support the March for Life. If you can, of course, post on social media, even if you can't actually march here in Washington. Only EWTN covers Thursday's March for Life here in Washington from start to finish. At 6 p.m. Eastern all this week, watch EWTN News Nightly's special March for Life Precious Gift coverage. And our final episode of Embracing Compassion, the coverage of the Pope's trip to Southeast Asia. Pope Francis says he was very moved by his experiences while visiting the Philippines this weekend. Millions turned out to greet him and attend masses. He said the Mass at Tacloban, which suffered a devastating typhoon in 2013, was especially powerful. Pope Francis left the Philippines, Asia's largest Catholic nation, Monday. His week-long trip included a short visit to Sri Lanka. Filipino officials say the Pope's final Mass in Manila Sunday drew a record crowd of 6 million despite the stormy weather. Our team following the Holy Father's journey to the Philippines took time to take in the local culture. Susie Pinto and Father Leo Patalinghug give us a tour of Filipino food market.
Father Leo, I don't know a lot about Filipino culture, but I do know that food is a very big part of Filipino culture.
Well, you've come to the right place at the Mercato Centrale, so open your hearts and loosen your belts. We're gonna go.
Okay, great. Sounds great.
Let's do it.
So, Father Leo, what do we have here?
These are a type of noodles. They're obviously Japanese, but Filipinos take it over. The longer the noodles, the longer the blessing.
Okay, so I'm gonna take a taste here.
Go for it.
Looks really good. Very tasty. I can taste the black pepper there.
Mm-hmm.
Lots going on here. There's meat, vegetables. Not very spicy though.
Nope, we'll get the spice.
Well, we're in the Philippines, but I'm noticing a lot of influences from other parts of Asia.
Absolutely. We've got meatballs, Asian style. We've got some crab and shrimp with some delicious hoisin sauce, and it's really awesome. This is crispy tapa. It's beef, and it was my favorite thing when I was a kid growing up. Awesome.
Nachos, street tacos?
I mean, remember, Our Lady of Guadalupe is also a patroness for the Philippines.
So this is the famous lechon.
Absolutely, and this is actually a boneless. It's the pork belly, and it comes from Cebu, which makes it super delicious and super famous. Cheers.
Oh, cheers. Nom, nom, nom. Father Leo, is that a shawarma?
Absolutely. If it's got spice, that's all about Filipino food and flavor. And remember that food is a religious experience, and the word religion means to be bound together, and food brings people together.
Are we already on dessert?
No, this is just on the way to the other good stuff. But remember, churros, it's from Spain because Philippines is named after King Philip, Little Philips. We were founded by Spain.
And you see that all over the place, such an influence of Spain and even 500 years later.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is only because you ate all your vegetables so far.
Delicious.
Mm-hmm. Filipino barbecue is pretty famous, from pieces of pork even to some intestines. Hey, why don't we just throw a piece of squid in there, wrap a jalapeno, but I think you'll like this one.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna pass on the intestines, but I will try some pork. Tasty, really tasty.
Filipinos do barbecue right.
Is that a deep dish pizza? I'm from Chicago, this is unbelievable.
Well, here's to ya. So all of these street foods show that when a community comes together around food, it's quality time. And for the Filipinos, food is certainly love. And the better the food, the more quality time you have. And just so you know, one of my favorites, fried chicken.
Okay.
Filipinos love. Can we try one of these? Fried chicken, and I gotta tell you, the crispier, the better.
Okay, here goes. Delicious, very crispy.
Oh, I'm hungry now. Thank you, Susie, Father Leo. Also, Alan Holdren, our chief photographer, Paul Fifield. Excellent coverage from Manila. Safe travels home. Thank you for watching tonight for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. Here in Washington and around the world, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night and God bless you.